Most local people support the Rotary Club. They recognise that it does good, but if you ask them, the main thing they can recall is that Rotary runs the bonfire and fireworks, which it does, and the Father Christmas sledge, which it doesn't. In a series of programmes, I set to find out about the organisation and the reasons why local people should consider joining it. As they say, doing good and having fun. I'm John Gauld and I'm a Rotarian. I'm going to tell you what we do in a series of interviews with key people in Rotary. I'm John Gauld. Today I'm talking to Kevin Thompson, who was 2 years ago the youngest president that Rotary Congleton had ever had. Today, Kevin has taken over responsibility for Rotary's international operations. Kevin, I think many people know Rotary for the bonfire and fireworks and don't know very much about it outside of that. So what's all this about international?
Yeah, well, I think that's very, very true, John, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you today. So essentially, people think of Rotary, but actually the full title of Rotary is Rotary International. So yeah, that's absolutely right. We do incredibly good work in our local community, and many of the listeners will have seen us around town with the high vis on, helping all of our local residents to stay safe and putting on incredible local community events such as the bonfire being a fantastic example. But Rotary's far more than that. It's a worldwide community of nearly 1.4 million members, and what this structure enables Rotary to do is to reach out and have all of these 1.4 million pulling together as an enormous team to help people around the globe who are less fortunate than us. So, for example, when there are major catastrophes such as earthquakes, tsunamis, what Rotary International can do is pull together the strength of all of that collective membership to reach out and to help all of those poor, unfortunate people.
So where does it get its money from? Because this must cost, what you're describing must cost a fortune.
It does, and that's what's so remarkable about the structure of Rotary International. So each member has a small membership charge, if you want to call it that, which enables the work of Rotary to go ahead, which is incredibly affordable. But then, by each club around the world raising money with its events, what it can then do is to put some of that money towards what's called the Rotary Foundation. And the Rotary Foundation is Rotary's own charity. And that foundation can then support these huge challenges around the world. And that's where the money comes from.
So for the last 120 years nearly, Rotary Foundation has been gathering funds?
Exactly right. And this is held incredibly responsibly. And your listeners may be interested that these charitable foundations, they're actually graded. And the Rotary Foundation has the highest possible grade in terms of how carefully it's looked after, the responsibility that's given to it, and the ethics that are run behind looking after that money that people very generously give and how it's distributed around the world to make sure, and this is really important, John, because people have a lot of concern, and I'm one of them, that they support causes out of their really hard-earned money. And what they need the reassurance of is that is getting to the people actually in need. And that's what the Rotary Foundation does. And it's held in the highest regard by the top governments across the world and the world's top leaders.
So part of it, I mean, we know over the years, I'm astounded to learn that Rotary had contributed $2.6 billion to the End Polio campaign, which it started back in 1985. But you're saying that the Rotary Foundation funds cover so many other things as well. So the $2.6 billion is just part of the funds that Rotary Foundation has at its disposal now.
That's absolutely right, John. That's just the start of it. And, you know, Rotary, in a way, it's brilliant at keeping all of this quiet, and it really needs to shout about it, and it's got so much to be proud about. Because, yeah, that's right, you mentioned that one example of End Polio now. And, you know, we're massively grateful to Bill and Melinda Gates, who also match fund everything that Rotary do. And, you know, their support, in addition to the amazing work that Rotarians around the world have done for all these years, has got us to 99% eradication of wild polio. It's an incredible feat, and it just shows the power of all of these millions of Rotarians across the globe just doing their own little bit, but when you pull it all together, the impact is huge. So we've done that with polio, but like I say, there's so much more than that. You know, we send disaster boxes out to where there's been earthquakes, where there's been tsunamis. So people have been displaced by these horrendous situations. It means that we can look after a family temporarily until their own countries can get back onto their feet and get them back into housing again.
So Disaster Box, we actually joined together with other Rotary clubs to pack disaster boxes, I understand.
So so that happens. One other absolutely amazing thing as well is there's an organisation that we partner with which is called Rise Against Hunger. And as we know, we're incredibly fortunate, aren't we? We don't really need to think about where our next meal is coming from. But in parts of the world, they really do. And what Rise Against Hunger does, it makes it possible for children to have one hot meal per day. They then come into school, so therefore you've got this really positive spiral, because they're coming into school, they're getting educated, they're getting a hot meal, because they've got sustenance, they've then got the ability to concentrate and to learn. Because they're then being educated, they then get qualifications, which means that they can then get a job, which then means they can make money, and therefore they can work their way out of poverty themselves.
The same thing applies, does it not? The same thing applies, does it not, to prosthetic limbs, where we have a service in third world countries? Is that mainly Africa, to help people with artificial limbs so that the wage earners can get back to work and support themselves and their families?
That's absolutely right, John. And you know, I think what I hope that the listeners are picking up from this is that these aren't just handouts. What Rotary is passionate about is to support people so that they can then become active members of society again. Because they're not wanting handouts, they're just wanting to get to a place where they can support their own families.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're so passionate about that. You know, another classic example is, let's look at the work that we've done with the Ukrainian refugees.
Well, absolutely. We've been very active in Congleton, helping them with English language lessons.
Absolutely. And you know, these incredible Ukrainians, they don't want a handout. They don't want to be on benefits. They just want to be able to learn our language so that they can then get a job to support themselves.
Yeah.
And the wonderful work of Rotary enables us to support those English lessons so that they can support themselves.
But the Ukrainian thing, as I understand it, is a model of an example of how Rotary can be incredibly fleet of foot, because its disaster aid program really started at the Romanian and Polish border, where Rotary was able through its own clubs, to give money to refugees as they came across the border with absolutely nothing, and did that within days of the war starting, as I understand it.
That's absolutely right. I've already spoken about the strength of having this huge membership around the globe, and it means that pretty much wherever anything happens, we've got feet on the ground immediately. And all of these partner agencies that we've got wonderful relationships with that have been forged over many years, and we can pull all that together. If you think of like a magician's magic hat, and it's got all of these wonderful spells inside it, which we can just reach into and we can pull out. Okay, so there's a tsunami there, so we'll send a disaster box there. Or there's something terrible happened in the Ukraine, so we'll get the Ukrainian Rotarians feet on the ground. We'll pull together another partner agency. And this is what Rotary are so highly regarded for. They are seen as the go-to people because they've got the connections and they've got the ability to quickly pull together all this support to help people who are in such desperate need.
It's fascinating, isn't it? So if you take somebody who feels that they want to join Rotary, primarily, I suppose they feel that they'd like to put a little bit back into their community. And it's only really when they become a Rotarian that they understand the breadth of the world of Rotary.
Absolutely. When I joined Rotary, yes, like many of these listeners, I saw the high vises around the town, you know, and that's kind of your first introduction, your first experience of Rotary, isn't it, John?
Well, yeah, we've all done it.
Yeah. But when I started looking into it a bit deeper, and I really encourage you to go on to the Rotary website, not the Congleton Rotary website, but the main Rotary International website. Please go on to that, because it's really eye-opening. You see, like you say, the width and the depth of the reach of Rotary, and then the incredible things that it does around the globe. And as I've learnt more and more and more, I've become more passionate about, yes, absolutely, charity begins at home. But let's use all of these incredible links we have to think about those people less fortunate than ourselves. And let's also think about those.
At the heart of Rotary, there's this, what do we call it, a mantra? The four-way test, which says you speak the truth, you don't do any harm to anybody, you do benefit, you do good to all mankind.
Is it the truth, and is it, will it create goodwill for all?
That's right, yeah. So is that message lost, or is it still as valid as it was 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, when it was first written down?
I think it's a remarkably perceptive mantra that was pulled together all those years ago, and it's as relevant today, probably more relevant today than it ever has been. And again, I would encourage listeners to look it up and to adopt it into their way of thinking,
into their own life.
Because it's very easy, isn't it, for all of us to slip into a silo way of thinking. Here I am, I'm in my own little community. Dare I say, I'm all right, Jack. But what if just a few of us started to think a little bit wider than that and started to think, what about if we started giving a little bit back, not just locally, but internationally? What kind of world could we create with that kind of thinking?
And that, in fact, is what every Rotarian does when they join Rotary. And that really brings us back to where we started, doesn't it? That a few pounds here and there becomes a multi-billion dollar charity that has the funds to distribute around the world when disasters happen. But it's all, in a very small way, there's something called Lend with Care.
Absolutely. So again, earlier you heard me speak about when we're not just about giving handouts. What Rotary recognise is people don't want that. They just want the ability and be given the opportunity to help themselves. And this is what Lend with Care is all about. So Lend with Care is an incredible organisation where let me give you an example. So somebody who wants to be a farmer in Africa, okay? But they need to get started because to start, they need to buy seeds. But how do you get started if you haven't got the money to buy the seeds with in the first place? Mm-hmm. So at a very basic level, John, what Rotary will do, they can go onto the Lend with Care website, they can look at that case and they can say, yeah, that's really worthy. We want to support that person. So, it may only need literally £50. Okay, John?
Yeah,
literally £50.
Buys the seed.
Yeah. And then from that, that person is away, and then all of a sudden, they're supporting their family, and then they pay back that £50 back into the fund, and then that £50 then can go back out to somebody else. So it's circular.
So we've been doing this for years, as I understand it. We've never lost any money.
We've not lost one penny.
It's amazing, isn't it?
But because Lend with Care ensure that all of the applicants are 100% trustworthy and genuine applicants. And that's why we work with Lend with Care, because there's that trust, because Rotary have worked with them for so many years now. And again, it's all about this strength because of Rotary's connection. So when people donate money, they've got this absolute peace of mind that their money is getting to feet on the ground and it's doing good.
I think the people of Congleton sort of need to know that most of the money that they contribute when Rotary is collecting money for events and so forth is spent in Congleton. And I think you've made the point that only a small amount from every Rotarian goes into this pot called Rotary Foundation, fed by its 1.4 million members. So, only £1 a head is 1.4 million pounds, and you can multiply that by 10 or 20, and that's how Foundation gets its money.
That's absolutely right. So, it's the power of multiplication, isn't it?
It is indeed.
And that's why it is so important that if anybody is listening to this today, and hopefully this inspires some of the listeners today, why the membership of Rotary International is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, of course, if it's £1 from 1.4 million, that's 1.4 million.
Yeah.
But if that membership drops to 500,000, then it's only 500,000 as an example. So it's so important that we keep growing Rotary so that we can do even more good in the years to come.
Rotary in Congleton has a very successful record of maintaining its membership, I think, where perhaps other clubs have been struggling for members. So we are quite successful in maintaining membership because we are seen to be so active in the town.
I think that's right, John. And also, you know, one of the things that we're guaranteed in life is that nothing stays the same. And when it comes, and it's not just Rotary, this is the same challenge that all organisations face, especially when they're very, very mature organisations. Because some organisations get to the point in their lives, don't they, where, no, we don't want to change. And then they wake up one morning and they've got 5, maybe 80-year-old members left, and then they turn around and they ask themselves the question, why doesn't anybody want to join? And what I'm so proud about the Rotary Congleton Club for doing is they embraced that really courageous conversation, and they said, we need to embrace change. You know, the old formalities that used to be around in the 1970s and the 1980s, where it was predominantly businessmen who turn up in their suits, in their 2-hour business lunches to get together, them days have gone, John. And we've now got a very relevant and modern club that is completely connected to its local and wider community and looks at saying, right, let's look at what the world needs and the local community needs and work back from that. Not from what we want, but what does the community need? And not many organisations have done that, especially in the Rotary world as well. Let's be honest, John. And you know, there are some clubs that are struggling, but there's a common theme. You look at the clubs that are struggling, and those are the clubs that are still doing things the same way that they were in the 1980s.
How very true. Yeah. So what we've got then is Kevin Thompson, as I said, the youngest ever president of Rotary Congleton 2 years ago, still beating the drum for Rotary and showing that youth and vigour really is the key to success locally. Well done, Kevin. Thank you for talking to us this morning.
No, my pleasure. And please, can I encourage all listeners, go onto the Rotary International website, look it up for yourselves, and please make contact if you agree with anything of what I've said today. Make contact. We'd love to have a conversation with you about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin.